Okay, so the 27th installment into the MCU in chronological order takes us to the Eternals, directed by Chloe Zhao. Okay, I'm not mincing words. I ain't gonna waste no time. This movie, I've now seen twice, is boring. The Eternals has got to be one of the most boring MCU movies I have ever seen. This, at least Thor: The Dark World, which is often criticized for being boring, at least that movie has some semblance of energy and actually has some character moments that I actually did like. This movie is just a flat. Yeah, like I said, The Eternals is a bore fest. It has no energy to it. It is boring. It's sluggish. It lags on forever. This movie is longer than Spider-Man: No Way Home, and that is a criminal shame because No Way Home is a movie that is full of energy, a story that's intriguing, and it has performances that are actually fun to watch. This is the exact opposite. The Eternals tries to be the Marvel version of Watchmen, but it doesn't understand the Watchmen story. It just says, "Oh, Watchmen's a mature story. Let's copy that." Meanwhile, the hack writers who wrote this movie never read the Watchmen comic book. Hell, I think they only seen the movie and is like, "Hey, this is easy." No, 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 no. This movie thinks that it has these nuances to it. This movie thinks that it's telling a compelling, serious story when in actuality, it's putting me to sleep because of the lack of energy for it, because of the lack of energy that it has to it. Listen, I have never seen a Chloe Zhao movie up to this point. Maybe she is a good director for the niche audience that she has, but to me, I think she's boring. I think she directs like she's directing traffic. Her pacing is really sluggish. The way she directs her actors to be wooden and lifeless with no personalities whatsoever is just a slug to sit through. Listen, I I'm gonna say this, and call me crazy. I would rather watch Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds over watching The Eternals. For the simple reason of this. Green Lantern at least has energy to it. Green Lantern at least has a semblance of fun. And I'm not saying that Green Lantern is a great movie because it's not. That movie has its own problems that I don't really care for. That's just a very generic, dumbed down superhero movie. But at least Martin Campbell, who directed the Green Lantern, he is at least, is at least trying to have fun with the source material, even though he was handicapped or in handcuffed with that thing. The Eternals. I've never read an Eternals comic book. I have no desire to read an Eternals comic book. I have seen maybe scattered images of the Eternals comic book, and from what it looks like a very bright, very colorful, just cosmic read. Now, again, that has a lot to do with Jack the King Kirby, who was well known for doing these cosmic stories and was the kingpin at doing those cosmic stories. This is the guy who created the New Gods and Apocalypse for DC. So like an Eternals movie, yeah, if you adapt that to screen with the right people, yeah, this literally could have been like a fun, bombastic, just space opera in the vein of Star Wars. Instead, we get this very, very, very forced, melodramatic Watchmen ripoff that is set mostly on Earth, with flashbacks that intercut throughout the entire movie, which really slows the pacing down. And you have actors that look like they'd rather be anywhere but what they're doing right now. Yes, this movie's biggest criticism for me is not only Chloe Zhao is just a very poor choice of the director for this movie. I do not care if she had just won an Oscar. Not every director is meant to do superhero movies because it is a niche genre and you need directors that have a basic understanding of the superhero genre and the superhero concept and have at least read maybe one or two comic books in their lifetime in order to bring a sense of energy to these things. At the end of the day, it's a superhero movie. You can make them serious, you can make them melodramatic, but at the same time, you got to make them fun. I mean, Chloe Zhao, as I mentioned, Chloe Zhao tries to make the Eternals feel like Watchmen, and it doesn't work. And she also tries to throw in a little Logan in there. But here's the seminal difference. James Mangold knows how to direct serious scenes. He knows how to have his actors look like they're having fun and have some energy to them. Even though Logan, when you watch it, that's not a fun movie. That's a very dark, very gritty, very violent movie. But it has moments of characters acting like characters. It has moments of levity that seem natural and not forced. I feel for everything that Logan goes through. I feel for everything that Charles Xavier goes through. In the Eternals, I feel nothing but hollowness. This is a very hollow, very shallow movie with just surface level things that will keep you somewhat intrigued. Other than that, It's a slug. It truly is a slug to sit through. If I were to give this movie anything with standouts, Barry Cohegan as the character of Droog, he was semi interesting. He's basically an Eternal that can manipulate people. He has a kind of sort of relationship with this Eternal called Makari, who is deaf. Out of the main romance, this romance is the one that actually got me intrigued. That intrigued me the most because number one, Makari doesn't talk. Number two, Druig is somewhat interesting because the two main leads are so boring. I was like watching paint dry, and I'll get to those two, standouts in a second. But yeah, in terms of a pseudo romance, Makari and Druig is the only one that actually got my intrigue. There's this character called Sprite, who is Eternal that is cursed to live her life as a small child. Out of all the Eternals who have the most interesting character arc, Sprite is the best one. Mainly because all they did was do a copy and paste of Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, and they gave that story to Makari, Icarus, and Cersei. That's it. That's basically it. But I like the whole idea of an Eternal who is forever cursed to be a child. Like, she's had all these life experiences, but she can never grow up. She can never live a life that's actually fulfilling. And she has an unquented love for the character of Icarus, played by Richard Madden. But because she's doomed to live as a small child, she cannot be with the one that she loves. So she's forever cursed. I like it. And I actually think that the child actress, Leah McHugh, I believe her name is, she actually did a fairly good job playing the character of Sprite. Like, I actually felt sorry for her. So yeah, I actually did not mind the character of Sprite. Watching this movie, I would have preferred her to be the lead character. At least she had some energy, and some of her quirks actually got a little bit of chuckles out of me here and there. And this is a chuckle-less movie. You have Don Lee as the character of Gilgamesh. You have Angelina Jolie as the character of Athena. It's whatever. You have Angelina Jolie in your movie. Now listen, her best years are long gone, but she's an actress that can handle physicality. And to me, I think Angelina Jolie is wasted. Like, she has this whole subplot where her character suffers from memory loss, and it makes her crazy in certain times, and that's pretty much it. And the certain fight and the fight scenes that she does have are so boring and so quick that if you go to the bathroom to take a piss, you're gonna miss it. And the character of Gilgamesh, this is another movie that kind of sort of teases that Gilgamesh and Athena have some sort of relationship to them, but it's mostly played like them having a very deep friendship and a very deep connection. And the movie also tells us that the character of Gilgamesh kind of is the one that keeps Athena in check whenever she starts to lose control. So that's okay, I guess. I mean, Don Lee, I've never seen anything from this man aside from this movie, and he didn't really overly impress me. He didn't have any impressive scenes of him showcasing his super strength and stuff like that. Same thing with Athena. Athena is supposed to be a variation of Athena, the goddess, of Greek mythology, and she doesn't do anything. Like, how do you have Angelina Jolie in your movie and you don't do anything of intrigue? Given the performance I got from Gemma Chan as Cersei, I would have rather had Angelina Jolie as the focal point character, because at least she has some semblance of charisma to her. Because Gemma Chan is charisma-less, and I'm getting very, very close to her and Richard Madden, because those two bring this movie down exponentially. You have Brian Tyree Henry, who plays the character of Phastos. He's basically the engineer of the Eternals. He's all right. His only defining character trait is that he's in a gay marriage with a kid, and that's it. And he kind of sort of doesn't like Icarus, but the movie never really builds up a rivalry between these two. Literally, if you blink, you would miss Phastos. That's how irrelevant his character is. You have the character of Ajax, played by Salma Hayek. Like I had mentioned, Eternals tries to play itself like Watchmen, so you can actually consider Salma Ajax to be more or less the comedian, this movie's version of the comedian played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I mean, Ajax doesn't have the vileness of the comedian, but it's the same structure. And like, her character dies at the beginning of the movie, and then most of her development comes through flashbacks, and stuff like that. And for what it is, Salma Hayek was all right. I mean, she's still a beautiful woman to look at. She's not a bad actress, but she's just okay. She's more or less like the mentor and leader of the Eternals, and that's pretty much her defining thing. And Other than that, there's nothing really to her as a character. She's just there. And then you have Camille Nanjali, who plays this character named Kingo. And I'll say this: Kingo is the Nanjali. I give the man credit. He at least tries to give Kingo a sense of humor. He at least tries to give Kingo some semblance of energy and personality. But the supporting cast that surrounds him, they're so dour, they're so boring, they're so wooden that the man is trying to do double just to get some energy, and he can only do so much in a very bland, boring movie. And the whole thing with his agent being by his side recording a documentary, that was not funny. That was so stupid. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it wasn't funny and was so stupid. The beginning of the movie introduces us to Dane Whitman, played by Kit Harington, and it establishes that he's in a romantic relationship with Cersei, and the movie also teases a kind of sort of romantic triangle with Icarus, because throughout the millenniums and throughout the centuries, Icarus and Cersei were a couple. They were married, basically. And then one day, Icarus just abandoned Cersei and pretty much disappeared forever. And that's where, and over time, Cersei met Dane, and they got together. Now Icarus is back. You could have had, instead of having this unfunny manservant follow Kingo around, it should have been Dane Whitman with the Eternals throughout this entire movie, because in addition to establishing a romantic relationship with Cersei and a kind of sort of triangle, and also the fact that Whitman's also, a professor for natural history, he could have joined the Eternals on their journey, given that he has some pedigree and some intellectual pedigree. And also you could expand it upon the love triangle, because this movie needed something to keep my interest. Instead, Kit Harington, he appears in the first 16 minutes of the movies, and then he appears in the last 5 minutes of the movie, making him a superfluous, wasted character who does absolutely nothing and means nothing to the overall value of this movie. Now listen, I'm not a big fan of Game of Thrones. Hell, I've never even seen an episode of Game of Thrones. But I understand that Jon Snow was a kind of popular character. So if you have Kit Harington in your movie, do something with him. Make him more of a focal point. Give him a character arc. The movie teases his eventual turn as the character known as the Black Knight with the Ebony Blade. From the research I've done on the Eternals and the characters that are in this movie, the only time you get some semblance of a hint of that is the mid-credit scene where you have Marsh Mahala Ali in a vocal cameo as Blade talking to Dane Whitman. Now, what does the Vampire Hunter have to do with the Eternals and cosmic magic? I have no idea, nor do I care. Blade works best when he's just a horror character hunting vampires and monsters. He doesn't work best when he does alien madness. But I digress. I think Dane Whitman is a wasted of a character. I think Kit Harington's talents are also really wasted. So now that I'm done criticizing that part of the cast, let's talk about the two leads, Richard Madden and Gemma Chan. These two are the most boring characters in any MCU movie. You have Richard Madden playing Icarus. If you're familiar with mythology, Icarus was so full of himself and was so self-assured that he was invincible, and then one day he flew too close to the sun and his wings melted off, pretty much humbling him. So yeah, Icarus is a big deal. Not only that, this movie portrays Icarus as being the Superman of the MCU. And he comes across more like Ozymandias, because it's revealed at the end of the movie that he was the one that was orchestrating the Deviants' attack on the Eternals. By the way, so just to clarify it, the Eternals were like this alien race created by a god named Erisham that was used for the advancement of Earth. But to counteract them, you also have the Deviants, who are the exact opposite of the Eternals and are forever their enemies. So whenever the Deviants arrive, the Eternals have to take action in order to kill them. And that's also their half-assed explanation as to say why the Eternals weren't around during Endgame, was because since there are no Deviants present, they can't interfere with the world. So Thanos wiping out half the population. So Thanos wiping out 50% of the population as a whole, That's not a call to arms to you, to these idiots? Horrible, horrible, horrible explanation. You pretty much told me that the Eternals are just lounged, boring people who don't want to do shit. These characters suck. Why was this movie? Who asked for this movie? Like, who legitimately asked for the Eternals? Because I didn't ask for the Eternals. I didn't ask for a boring movie. So let me get to Richard Madden and Gemma Chan so I can wrap this boring review up. So yeah, these two characters are freaking boring. They're so wooden. Richard Madden, in certain scenes, he tries to put on a threatening, commanding presence, but the man's acting is so wooden and so stale that I don't buy it for a second. And then you have Gemma Chan as the character of Cersei. I kid you not. There were multiple times where I forgot that Gemma Chan was in this movie because her character is so boring and so bland. There were literally moments where I would see her on screen and I was like, hey, where'd you come from? That's how bad Gemma Chan's acting is in this movie. That's how bad her character is. It is so lifeless. It is so wooden that I forget that she's in this movie. That's not good. When you have a character that's supposed to be the leader of a team, and I forget that she's in the movie half the time, that's not good. That shows me that Chloe Zhao is not someone that you should be giving this kind of source material to, because she doesn't understand this source material. She can't handle an ensemble cast. Maybe with her more independent movies, she can be extremely talented. I ain't gonna take nothing away from her, but this is not a good first impression for me. She cannot do these big blockbusters. Her style is not meant for it, and it shows. Her style is meant for smaller scale productions, and when she tries to adapt her style to something like this, you can see the fatal flaws. This movie, like I said, this movie's pacing problems are prevalent. This movie moves like a slug. It's a slug to sit through. The action sequences are very dull, very basic, very boring. The whole third act, of a celestial being born from the Earth's core is just so mind-numbingly boring. I fell asleep twice just trying to keep up with it. That's how boring it was. Oh man. Like I said, the overall core of this story is an exact ripoff of The Watchmen. The people who wrote this movie, they do not understand Alan Moore's story. They don't understand what that story was trying to convey and trying to tell. These idiots who wrote this movie are like, oh, Watchmen, that has a very mature and adult story. Let's apply that to the Eternals and do that. And make it Earth-based and take away all the cosmic fun that can come with it. Very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. In my opinion, the Eternals should have been done like Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a bombastic, just outer space romp that is just so over the top but also fun. You can still do the serious stuff with the group. Like, you don't have to make them like the Guardians, but at least put them in situations where they're at least on these cosmic adventures and having fun while also finding out the answers. And also have a villain that's worth investing my time into, because having Icarus as the villain was kind of lame and was a Watchmen ripoff, because basically Ozymandias. You already have this character of Erishim, who is the creator of the Eternals and the creator of the Deviants, and who the Eternals rebel against because they go against his teachings. Have him be the lead villain. Have the Eternals wipe him out and see what goes from there. But they don't do that. You establish this whole thing with and again, this movie should have been like the Guardians, because it's actually the Guardians of the Galaxy that introduced the idea of these Celestials. So you could have expanded upon this with the Eternals in a more cosmic, fun way, instead of this boring, earthbound way in which the only scenes that are remotely interesting are when the Eternals are just having human conversations and sitting down on a table doing nothing. Because when they're in action, the action is boring, and I forget what happens half the time. So yeah, to put a cap on this really, really dull movie, after Icarus flies into the sun in a self-sacrifice, the Eternals get kidnapped by Erishim, and he prepares them for judgment. On the flip end, you have Druig, Athena, and Makari going on a cosmic adventure to find other Eternals and to tell them that Erishim is just an asshole. And then you have a mid-credit scene with Eros, Star Fox, the brother of Thanos, who is played by Harry Styles, and this character of Pip, voiced by Peyton Oswalt, who are Eternals themselves, who are going to join the fray in the hunt for Arishem and stuff like that. So yeah, basically, the Eternals is a useless side story that doesn't do much but bore you to tears. Chloe Zhao, I'll give Chloe Zhao this. I like the fact that she used on-location shooting. I do like some of the wardrobe. Some of the costumes, they do look pretty decent. They look very comic booky. But when you put them against the backdrop of this movie that has a very washed out and dull looking color palette with no vibrancy and no color, it just looks like people wearing Halloween costumes. I mean, yeah, it's a give and take with this freaking movie. So yeah, I know this entire movie was me bashing the Eternals because I don't really have nothing much to say. I did not like this movie a second time around. The first time around, I was very lenient to it, but watching it again, now that I have a base knowledge of it, yeah. The Eternals is a movie that you can skip and you ain't gonna miss anything. This movie to me is a 4 out of 10. It's one of the most boring MCU movies ever. It doesn't add anything of intrigue, and it makes the Eternals look like a bunch of cowards because they chose to do nothing when Thanos did his snap. And everything else that's in this movie, it's so bland and so boring and so forgettable that there's nothing really to it. Whatever ideas that you could have expanded upon, this movie didn't even want to attempt to do it because it doesn't want to have fun. It just wants to bore you. So yeah, a 4 out of 10 for the Eternals. Well, let me know your thoughts in these comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.